In this video, we take a look at what transactions, applications, and reports are in SAP. We discuss how transactions are used in the classic SAP graphical user interface, how applications differ in the modern Fiori world, and why both concepts are so important for everyday work in the SAP system. The aim is to understand the theoretical basics and clearly distinguish between the terms. In the SAP system, the term transaction refers to a technical entry point to a clearly defined function. Each transaction can be accessed via a so-called transaction code, or T-code for short. This unique code is entered in the command line of the SAP graphical user interface and leads directly to a specific screen or function in the system. A well-known example is the code Me21N, which is used to create a purchase order. After entering the code, the corresponding input screen opens immediately. Transactions are used to execute individual work steps within business processes in the SAP system. They can be very simple, such as displaying master data, or more complex, requiring multiple entries and checks. It is important to note that a transaction usually represents a specific functional step and not the entire business process. Transactions in the classic SAP graphical user interface typically have a form-based structure. There are structured input fields for header data, such as vendor or plant, and for item data, such as material number or quantity. The data entered is processed using buttons such as Save, Check, or Execute. The SAP graphical user interface was the standard way to access the system for many years. Most of the functions in SAP R/3 and SAP ERP were used exclusively via transactions in this environment. Many of these transactions are still in use today. Technically, there is a program behind every transaction, usually an ABAP program. ABAP is SAP's programming language, which is used to implement the logic of the system. A program contains the code that determines which data is processed, which masks are displayed, and which functions are available. Programs can be structured in very different ways. A simple report program, for example, is used solely to display data in list form. Other programs are known as dialog programs, which control complex processes and comprise multiple screens and processing steps. Programs thus form the technical basis for the functions that are used via transactions in the SAP system. However, with the introduction of SAP HANA and the new ERP Generation S/4HANA, SAP has initiated a change. In addition to classic transactions in the graphical user interface, the concept of applications in SAP Fiori now plays a central role. Fiori is the modern user interface that runs in a web browser and is based on role-based apps. Instead of long lists of transaction codes, each user is shown exactly the applications that are relevant to their role. For example, a purchaser sees the Create Purchase Order app, while a controller sees the Display Cost Center Report app. These applications are graphically more appealing and are based on modern usability standards. An application in Fiori basically corresponds to a transaction in the classic world, but in a more modern form. While a transaction in the SAP graphical user interface works via masks and input fields, a Fiori application is often more interactive, with dashboards, diagrams, and filter options. This allows information to be captured and processed more quickly. For example, in the SAP graphical user interface, a user would call up the Warehouse Management Monitor via a transaction code to get an overview of warehouse stocks or open warehouse processes. In Fiori, on the other hand, there is an app that immediately provides a clear list with filter options and graphical representations. The underlying process is the same, but the presentation and operation are significantly more modern. In theory, it can be said that transactions and applications are both interfaces that users can use to access SAP data and functions. The transaction is the classic concept, identified by a T-code, while the application is the modern, user-friendly implementation that is often provided in Fiori. There is another difference as well. Transactions are closely linked to modules, such as materials management or finance. Applications, on the other hand, are more role-based. They are not only based on the module, but also on the actual tasks of a specific person in the company. This provides more targeted support for the work. It is important to understand that transactions have not disappeared. Even in S/4HANA, there are many classic transactions that continue to be used. At the same time, SAP is continuously expanding its range of Fiori applications. In practice, many companies today work with a hybrid model. Standard processes run in Fiori apps, while complex or rarely used functions continue to be executed in classic transactions. This brings us to the end of the video. In this video, we learned that transactions in SAP are clearly defined functions that are started using transaction codes and are typically used in the SAP graphical user interface. We understood that applications in the Fiori environment represent a more modern form of these functions, which are role-based and user-friendly. We have seen that both concepts are closely related, transactions as the origin, applications as a further development. In practice, companies today often use both in parallel. This clearly shows how SAP has shaped the path from the traditional form interface to modern, role-based applications.
We hope the video helped you. In case you got any additional questions or comments, please leave a message below. See you next time, your advist-Academy.